good evening. This is Hal Shurtleff with Camp Constitution Radio, and this is our show number 7, I believe. I am your host, Hal Shurtleff. I am the co-founder and director of Camp Constitution, and among other things, Camp Constitution runs a week-long summer camp program, actually a week and a day, an all-volunteer family camp in Rindge, New Hampshire. And we also have a press arm. We have published a number of items that you can find on our website, campconstitution.net, including a reprint of an article originally published in 1898 by John Dewey, dealing with education. And John Dewey, way back then, said that a literate society wasn't necessary. And this particular little brief print we have was written by Sam Blumenfeld, who will be my guest very shortly. Now, this program is heard on WXME Shortwave The Planet every Monday evening at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we also make this available on YouTube. We download it and transfer it to a YouTube format and put a lot of photos up, so it's not just a recording. And you'll see pictures of our guest and maybe some issues, some pictures of various things. We had Tom DeWeese on very recently, and we had a lot of other documents, pictures of documents that are germane to the issue of Agenda 21. So, but I'm very pleased to announce that our guest on tonight's show is Dr. Sam Blumenfeld. Sam Blumenfeld is a very good friend of mine. He's been around, he's 88 years of age. He's a World War II veteran, but he has been a pioneer in the modern homeschool movement. Sam has written over 15 books, numerous articles. He used to have a newsletter, which is available on Scribd and many other sources. So he wrote the newsletter for about, 10 or 12 years, a monthly newsletter with some timeless articles, very important articles. Sam is the author of the Alpha Phonics book, which has been used for several generations to teach people how to read. And so one of the things that Sam has said over the years is that you don't need puppets popping out of trash cans to teach your parents how to teach children how to read. And my wife and I have used the Alpha Phonics to teach our children. The oldest is 28. Excuse me, I'm still getting over this chest cold. And the youngest is 10. And they're, I would say, somewhat literate, highly literate young people as a result. Well, Sam, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Well, thank you for coming on. This program is pre-recorded. And as we're recording this, we're observing another snowstorm in Boston and the Boston area. And I think we've had 3 weekends of snow, up to 2 feet of snow. And I think we broke all records, and now we're heading for a Arctic blast. So, Al Gore, where are you when we need you? We'd love to have some. So, Sam, I give a good introduction before you called in. So just mention a little bit about your what you've been doing all these years and the book you're working on that will soon be published.
Well, yes. Well, the book is entitled Crimes of the Educators, and it is the result of over 40 years of research into why American public schools have failed American children and why they are in such disarray and why the teaching of reading has been skewed from the 1930s onwards.
Now, Sam, you've done incredible research. You have a book entitled NEA, Trojan Horse in American Education, which I think was published, in the late 70s, early 80s?
In the 80s, yeah, in the early 80s, right.
And I'm actually holding on to a hardback copy of Is Public Education Necessary? That was one of your first books, I believe, on the subject of public education, or government education, as we'd like to call it. And what you were like an editor for was it Prentice Hall, one of the big publishing companies in New York City back in the 50s?
I was editor actually, or I worked for four of the big
Grosset
publishers. The last one was Grosset and Dunlap, and of course Grosset is the famous publisher of the Hardy Boys and the Nancy Drews and all those wonderful children's books. But I was editor of the Universal Library. That is their quality paperback line. And so I was able to get many very good books into paperback from the back lists of many of the big publishers in New York. And
when did you become aware of the reading problem in the United States?
This was in the late 1950s, and I was the editor over at Grosset and Dunlap, and a friend of mine, a conservative friend of mine, a lawyer friend by the name of Watson Washburn, came to my office and asked me to become a member of his National Advisory Council to the Reading Reform Foundation. He had just created this tax-exempt organization, and I asked him what was the purpose of the Reading Reform Foundation, and he said it was to get phonics back in the schools. Well, that was all news to me. I said, well, how can they possibly teach reading without phonics? Mm-hmm. And so he advised me to read Rudolph Flesch's book, Why Johnny Can't Read, which was published in 1955. And of course, Flesch explained why Johnny can't read. He said that the professors of education had gotten rid of the traditional phonics method of teaching reading, and they had put in this new sight method, this whole word method that teaches children to read English as if it were Chinese, an ideographic system rather than a phonetic system. And he said that was causing the reading problems throughout the country, and that was why Johnny couldn't learn to read. And so that was all news to me, and I joined the Reading Reform Foundation and became interested in the reading problem. And then when I left Grosset and Dunlap and went to work in the Boston area for Robert Welch, I became interested in the conspiracy theory, you know, of why America has been going in this socialist direction. What was behind it? And of course, Robert Welch exposed it. Then I began to write full-time books, and I decided to write a book on the reading, bring it up to date. In other words, that was already in the 1970s, so that was a good almost 25 years after Rudolph Flesch's book. And in writing The New Illiterates, I got to the very bottom of the problem that we were having with teaching reading in our country. And I found that the Look-Say method had been conceived by the Reverend Thomas H. Gallaudet, the teacher of the deaf and dumb. He taught the deaf to read by using pictures and words, juxtaposing pictures and words, and by not having to teach the alphabet because these poor individuals could not hear sounds. So he used this sight method, and he thought that this sight method could be used to teach normal children to read. And so the Boston primary schools adopted the Gallaudet's method in the around 1837, and by the 1840s, it was creating such terrible reading problems in Boston that the Boston masters, the Boston schoolmasters, wrote a devastating critique of this new method of teaching reading. And of course, the schools went back to the teaching of phonics. But this look-say method was adopted by the normal schools, by the new teachers, the government teachers' academies. And so it was there, it was considered the preferred method of teaching, but it was not used until the turn of the century when the progressives dug it up and sort of brushed it off and decided to use it in their new progressive curriculum to dumb down America.
Now, when you say, so you're saying dumb down, that this is a deliberate attempt. This isn't well-intentioned. I believe you mentioned that Gallaudet was a well-intentioned person. He didn't have any evil designs. But people like John Dewey and others did indeed have a real contempt for the culture and deliberately worked to destroy. I think you used the word menticide, to destroy mind.
To cripple the mentality, to cripple the minds of Americans, because they were determined to change America into a socialist society. And the only thing they had to go on, they really didn't know what a socialist society would be like. What they did was they adopted the fantasy that was written by Edward Bellamy in his novel Looking Backward, which was published in 1888.
So
in that novel, Bellamy showed how America could become communist, a communist country, and that's the model that the progressives used. They wanted a communist America. They were determined to get rid of our constitutional republic and replace it with a collectivist society. And so they decided that the only way they could do that was to first dumb down the American people so that they would not know the difference between communism and freedom, and they could be easily persuaded to vote in a communist president and a communist way of life, which of course they've already done here in the United States by electing a communist by the name of Barack Obama. The fact that we now have a communist actually in the White House is an indication of their determination to change this country, and that they were willing to do their work patiently for 100 years before they could reach this point.
In your book, The Crimes of the Educators, soon to be published, I think you said it'll be out in the spring.
Right.
That's a serious charge to say that this isn't just the result of misguided ideologues, but these are actual criminals. So if you could back that up. I mean, your book, you gave me a forward, an advanced copy. It's devastating. And you say things that I would submit many of your contemporaries, colleagues, are afraid to say. And I say that because I was at a Stop the Common Core rally in Massachusetts, in Boston, not too long ago. It was a little bit warmer. And there's a statue of Horace Mann right in front of the State House, and some of these folks were paying respect to the memory of Horace Mann. And I was telling the people, I said, no, this guy was the reason. Common Core is just an extension of what this guy wanted. There's nothing to praise this man. And most people just don't seem to either understand it or they're afraid. They're afraid to be called, be called extremist. So can you handle that, just deal with that question? And when you say crimes, back it up a little bit.
Well, most Americans are totally ignorant of the people behind the public school movement in this country. Horace Mann, for example, was a Unitarian. He was born in a Calvinist family, but gave up Calvinism. He was strongly anti-Calvinist, which was also true of Harvard University. Remember, Harvard had been started by the Puritans, by Calvinist Puritans, and then they gradually went liberal and finally adopted Unitarianism as their basic spiritual faith at Harvard University.
You're talking about the 1820s and 1830s. You're not talking about 20 years ago. You're talking about 150 or 160 years ago.
Well, yes. In other words, Harvard started on its road to Unitarianism in the early 1800s, and they became very influential throughout the United States in the university world. Of course, the Calvinists objected, but they didn't have the political power. The Unitarians in the Boston area were extremely powerful from a political point of view. They were able to take control of the legislature, of the so-called general court, and they were able to get their new laws for public education in place.
Well, Sam, let me ask you a question. Prior to the compulsory education laws weren't passed until what, the 1840s?
Well, the first compulsory school education law was passed in Massachusetts in the 1850s.
So we were just, what, 2 generations from the founding fathers, or maybe 2.5 generations.
Right.
And by the 1850s, the people have lost the concept of personal responsibility and the fact that the children, or the education of the children, are the primary result, the job of the parents, and they basically allowed the institutionalization of their children way back in the 1850s. And how long did it take the rest of the country?
It didn't happen overnight.
Right.
And there was a great deal of opposition to the public school movement, but the opposition did not have the kind of political power that the Unitarians had. That was the problem, basically, because there was a great dispute between Horace Mann and the public school masters. You see, New England or Massachusetts had common schools from the very beginning. That is, schools that were controlled by the towns. And what Horace Mann did was he centralized education in the state, and he became the superintendent, the first superintendent of schools, in which they would have a statewide curriculum, statewide rules, state teachers' colleges. For example, that he considered his greatest achievement was to create a state teachers' college. In other words, where the government would educate teachers. And, of course, he modeled it on the Prussians, because that's what they had in Prussia. And he visited Prussia and was greatly impressed by the Prussian system. And, of course, the Calvinists complained. They said, but the Prussian system was made for a dictatorship. It was made for an authoritarian state. But Horace Mann argued that it could be adapted to America's values. And, of course, nothing of the sort happened, although I must say that the public schools until the 1930s, when I was going to them in New York City, were pretty conservative. They were patriotic, and they knew how to teach reading, writing, and arithmetic. So, because at least people with brains managed to maintain control of the system until the progressives, the real crazies, took over. The progressives.
Now, you mentioned that the Depression helped to save a generation, or at least a handful of students, because schools couldn't afford the new reading books, the Dick and Jane readers that dramatically dumbed down C-Spot, Run, and this silly nonsense that they use it today. And I think Dr. Seuss. I think you commented on Dr. Seuss. I can't remember what was his. That was his pen name. I can't think of his real name.
Well, Dr. Seuss, of course, is famous for his children's books, which, however, were written to order by Random House. They wanted books, and also they provided Dr. Seuss with 220 words that he had to use. In other words, he could not dream up these books on his own and use his own vocabulary. He was forced to use the vocabulary they provided because what the educators wanted was to be able to have the children memorize these words as sight words, without knowing how to read phonetically.
Right, sound them out.
So that when they entered school, they would have already learned a large sight vocabulary, and therefore the schools could claim that, we're teaching reading so well that all of these kids have memorized all of these sight words. But of course, by the time you reach the third grade, those sight words, children forget half of them anyway.
No,
but also required reading is much richer than just those sight words, and so the kids hit against a wall, and they become dyslexic or reading disabled or functionally illiterate.
Now, I think you said at one point that the average child, by the time he or she's 3 or 4 years old, has a vocabulary of about 2,000 words.
Oh, yeah. The children teach themselves to speak their own language because they're born with a language faculty. No other species has this faculty in their brains put there by God.
Right.
God did not give cats and dogs and apes this faculty. Yes, they make noises with their throats, but that's done by their vocal cords. There is nothing in their brains that produces language.
Right, and dogs don't contemplate their dogness, do they?
No, and the reason why God gave man the language faculty is because he wanted man to create civilization, to take dominion. That's what it says in Genesis.
That's right, take dominion over all things.
Take dominion, and he also had Adam name the animals. So Adam became a lexicographer and an inventor of words. You see, he had to name the animals.
That's right.
Because God wanted human beings to take dominion. He gave us that power. That's why the language faculty is the most powerful force in the world. It makes the human brain the most powerful single organism in the entire universe. Because it is the human brain that has enabled man to go to the moon and back.
Right.
And to create the atomic bomb. And to create all of these inventions that have created this incredible high technology civilization.
And also to make shows like this available on WBCQ shortwave 7490, heard every Monday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, broadcasting out of the beautiful Monticello, Maine, in Aroostook County. Well, Sam, we have about 5 or 6 minutes left, and I know I want to discuss a little bit about Common Core because I think this may be what we need to wake people up because here you are, been at this. You're 88 years of age. You've been at this for a good part of your life, trying to warn people, and you've had a lot of success. Let's not forget, even though it looks like, are we making any progress? Look at this wonderful blossoming homeschool movement and all of the positive things that have happened as a result of. But this Common Core, talk a little bit about Common Core and your thoughts on it.
Well, the Common Core, this is an attempt on the part of today's educators to create so-called standards. And these standards have now been translated into textbooks. And all you have to do is read those textbooks to see how bad these so-called standards are. For example, the Pearson Company has already produced their Common Core reading program, which is the most atrocious program I have ever had, have ever examined. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. It is not going to teach the children anything. As a matter of fact, it's going to totally confuse them. And that's the same with arithmetic. You know, they got rid of arithmetic, which is really a counting system that requires memorization of the arithmetic facts in order to be able to use the system effectively. Well, you know, memorization has been kicked out of the schools now. They call rote memorization a form of child abuse.
Child abuse, yeah.
And so now children are back counting on their fingers, you know.
Well, it's interesting. In my 8th grade, I went to a public school in Boston back in the 70s, late 60s, mid 60s, late 70s, late 60s to I graduated in 77. I remember my 8th grade history teacher. We had to memorize the first paragraph of the Declaration of Independence, which I still remember it.
Good.
And
good.
the Gettysburg Address. We had to memorize dates because it's important to learn dates when things happened. And when I teach my children, I would say, did Abraham Lincoln live about the same time George Washington lived? You know, did Moses know? Alexander the Great? So to give them a concept of history, that timeline of history, it's very important. But when
absolutely.
when you do away with all this, it makes things very confusing and almost frustrating to learn.
Well, most kids today can't tell you the dates of the Civil War. They can't tell you the dates of World War I or even World War II. Some of them don't even know who we were fighting in World War II.
Most kids have grown up, and now they're adults who can't tell us this. They can give us the lineup of the Boston Red Sox and all the members of the Patriots or the Seahawks or whatever team they're following, but and the Constitution, they have no idea what that. And even when they hear what it means, they still don't understand it. You see, and it's all done a little bit. Well, tell us a little bit about the book when it will be out. Your most recent book.
The title of the book is Crimes of the Educators. And in that crime, I expose the most diabolical conspiracy that America has ever seen. This is a conspiracy on the part of the progressive educators to change America from a constitutional republic into a socialist society. And Dewey said that it's going to take time. We can't rush it. He said because if we go too fast, people will wake up and they'll oppose our program. And so they've worked very slowly to the point where now, here we are in the year, 2015, and we have a largely socialist government in Washington. And this is what we have to get rid of. This is why the Republicans have been won so well, because finally the American people realize what is happening.
Sam, how can people get a copy of this book when it is available?
Well, they'll be able to get it on Amazon and Google,
okay.
And it's being published by WorldNet Daily Books.
Oh, great!
And WorldNet Daily, of course, has its own website, its news website, which reaches millions of viewers every day.
And also, let me do it. The listeners, I'll also let them know that a lot of your books, if not all of them, are available on Amazon.
Yes.
The NEA plus Morse Alphaphonics.
Right, and also.
Hey, Sam, we got less than a minute, so I want to thank you for being a guest. We'll have you on again. And Sam also has been an instructor over the years at Camp Constitution. And please, if you want to learn more about our wonderful camp program and all of the other things we do, campconstitution.net. Well, Sam, it's been a pleasure and an honor, and we'll catch you down the road.
Okay. Thanks for having me. Bye-bye.
God bless you.